Yeah, I want to have a conversation about Ole Miss and Tennessee. And essentially, what do we think on who would win that matchup if they were to square off head-to-head? Because
Ole Miss for me.
Okay, so that answers my question, and that's why I've got Ole Miss ahead of them in my current ranking. And this is less of a debate, more of a conversation. I know that we always jump into these segments with the intention to argue here a little bit, but I think the version of Ole Miss that we saw against Georgia is a top 5 team in the country. And there's a reason why they had so much hype coming into the year. If they hadn't lost that freaking Kentucky game, and ifs are useless in the world of college football, but if they had not, the way that we'd be perceiving them would be so much differently. And what they did against Georgia is a very dominant well-roundedness. Their offensive line, we're still uncertain on it if they can match up in a game where they're going up with a front that is like Tennessee's that could give them fits. But their passing attack was clicking, their run game was clicking, and their pass rush took over the football game. That version is certainly a top 5 team. And I'd argue they could potentially beat a team like Texas if they faced off on a neutral field.
So here is where I am with Ole Miss. I'm with you in reference to, Joe, why you have them above Tennessee. However, the Kentucky loss is still there. The LSU loss is still there. And for everything that it's worth with Tennessee, I mean, Joe, they had a pretty convincing win in the second half. Domination, which is really what it was against Alabama. And when I look at Ole Miss, I mean, the Georgia game is a very big win, and I can't take that away from them. It is, okay? But I'm splitting hairs on Tennessee and Ole Miss here. The second loss, unfortunately for Ole Miss, for me here, is the deciding factor. Okay, because what if Tennessee upset or beats? Well, it would be an upset. They're an 8-point dog. Okay, if Tennessee upsets Georgia here, then what? I mean, again, we come in here every week and we talk about this. I'm about what's happened through 12 weeks, not what I think is going to happen in the future. That's not how our power rankings can or should or will work, because the games still have to be played. It's if we're fighting over semantics in reference to Ole Miss, who I think is trending, and Joe, great teams start picking in November, and that is what Ole Miss is doing, right? I still think that Ole Miss is one of the top tier teams in the country, even with the 2 losses. But Joe, I look at Ole Miss here too. They trailed for 2 minutes against Kentucky. They trailed for no minutes in regulation on LSU. None. They had led that entire game. So, look, it just comes down simply for me that Tennessee does not have that second loss. And if there is a second loss that comes for Tennessee this week, obviously they'll be down. But I got to tell you something, man. I don't really know if I'm Ole Miss if I don't want to move that much in these rankings or power rankings, because Joe, they're perfectly placed where they are at the current moment. If you looked at the bracket last night, they would have started off with Penn State, who, by the way, they beat in a bowl game last year. And then the second round, they would have had BYU. So if I'm Ole Miss, I'm like, look, we're going to win out. I don't want to get to an SEC championship game. Let's just get to a home playoff game or away playoff game and go from there. Joe, I got to be real with you. I mean, Ole Miss, for what it's worth, could run the table if they're put in a favorable bracket situation. The only problem with Ole Miss, for me, Joe, is both teams have really good defenses, but one team can run the football more effectively, and that's Tennessee, okay? When Ole Miss has had struggles, it's when teams have had better secondaries that slow down their passing game offensively, and when they've needed to line up and run the football, they haven't been able to. Now, that's also because Trey Harris has not been available for them either. So what does the insertion of Trey Harris do for Ole Miss that's already peaking? But he is out, right? Like, he's been out. So I don't really know the outright status of Trey Harris. You want to put him at 4, I put him at 5. I'm not going to fight you over it. And I know you said this is more of a debate or conversation.
Yeah, conversation than a debate.
But again, if you're asking me why I put him, if I'm going to fight over semantics, it's going to be that loss. And because if it came down to it, I don't know if Ole Miss can consistently run the football.
I want to bring this up on a tangential point the way that the playoff committee constructs their bracket is not similar to the way that we do these power rankings, because we're trying to argue who's the best teams, who do we think would win head-to-head, and so forth. I think that Ole Miss would be, maybe they're not the most deserving at the current moment because of their resume, but they would be the most competitive 5 seed. They would be the best team, in my opinion, to put at that 5 seed to put up the most competitive potential run that they could string together. They would beat Boise State. They would beat the brakes off of them if they got that matchup between them and Boise State. And then the 4 seed matchup would be against BYU, or it would be against Miami. And I had argued that Ole Miss, the way that they're structured defensively, is built to win both of those football games, or at least keep things close with Miami if they don't outscore them. I think that Ole Miss, there could be an argument there. It's not going to come to fruition, but if I were making that decision and I were making that pick, that's what I would do.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, again, just depends on where you put them, right? I mean, again, I would not want to be at that 5 seed, though. I mean, you want to consider them where they are right now, taking on Penn State and BYU. Hey, man, leave me be. Leave me be. Let everybody beat everybody up. I want to stay at 11. We'll go on the road and play Penn State. We think we can beat them, and then we got to play BYU. Joe, if I'm Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin, I'm like, look, we've done what we needed to do. Guys, let's win these next couple of games, get out of here, and let's go home. That's what I'd be saying if I'm Lane Kiffin.
BetOnline remains your top spot for all of your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL are all in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for 50% off your first deposit. That is a 50% welcome bonus. BetOnline, where the game starts.